The 1-hour rule is not a productivity hack. It's a principle, a philosophy of how we choose to use the most democratic resource in the world. Time. Person on this planet gets 20. What differentiates one life from another is not how much time we have, but what we do with the time we're given. The 1-hour rule invites us to reclaim just one of those hours and direct it towards something that improves our future rather than distracts us from our present. Most people drift. Not because they're lazy, but because they're busy. They're reactive, not intentional. Their days are filled with responsibilities, obligations, and noise. The 1-hour rule disrupts that drift. It says, 1 hour a day without compromise will be dedicated to deliberate growth. Not survival, not routine, growth. That hour becomes sacred, protected, non-negotiable, and it doesn't need to be dramatic. You don't need to quit your job or move to a monastery. The power of the 1-hour rule lies in its simplicity. It could be 1 hour learning a language, writing a book, building a business, sharpening a skill, or studying a subject that deepens your value. The activity doesn't matter as much as the intention behind it. That it is future-oriented, that it moves you forward. The reason this matters is because change rarely announces itself. Most breakthroughs don't come in lightning strikes. They come in quiet, compounding moments of commitment. 1 hour a day may not seem like much, but it's enough to pull your life in a new direction. When done consistently, it redefines what you're capable of and recalibrates your trajectory. It also redefines your relationship with time. Because when you reserve 1 hour a day for growth, you start to see time differently. You stop saying, "I don't have time," and start realizing that it was never about time. It was about priority. You begin to understand that urgency often disguises what truly matters, and you learn to stop negotiating with the future you. That 1 hour becomes a mirror. It shows you where your discipline lives and where your excuses hide. It confronts you gently but firmly with the truth. That greatness isn't born from occasional intensity, but from consistent effort, from the quiet decision made daily to not waste the hour you still control. Well, over time, that 1 hour a day bleeds into the rest of your life. You carry its clarity, its focus, its sense of direction. You begin to notice how much of your day is lived on autopilot, and you start to wake up. You ask better questions. You make better decisions. You build not just better habits, but a better self. And when life becomes chaotic, as it always does, the 1 hour rule becomes your anchor. Your promise to yourself that even if everything else feels uncertain, 1 hour still belongs to the future you're building. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. We live in a world obsessed with quick wins, rapid transformation, overnight success, 10-day plans. But the truth is, meaningful progress isn't loud. It's quiet, invisible at first. The 1 hour rule taps into this truth by leveraging the most powerful force in personal growth: compounding. Compounding isn't just a financial principle. It's a law of nature. Small efforts, done consistently, build on each other. Repetition creates momentum. Momentum creates mastery. Momentum creates mastery. Mastery creates transformation. An hour today might not feel like it changes anything, but 1 hour, repeated 365 times, becomes something entirely different. It becomes force, weight, direction. Think of what you could do with 365 hours. That's more than 9 40-hour work weeks, all dedicated to one pursuit. If you spent those hours learning a skill, you'd move from beginner to competent. If you spent them building something, you'd likely finish it. If you spent them on your health, relationships, creativity, or purpose, you wouldn't just feel different, you'd be different. What makes this powerful is how unassuming it is. There's nothing flashy about showing up for an hour a day. There's no viral moment, no applause. No applause. But in the background, beneath the surface, something is always changing. And by the time others notice the result, the real work is already done. Deep inside your habits, your mindset, your identity. This is where the compound effect becomes dangerous in the best way. Because once you start to feel it, you don't want to stop. One day missed suddenly matters because you understand what it costs. You're no longer chasing change, you're maintaining momentum. The equation shifts from starting to sustaining. And that's where real transformation happens. It also creates evidence, tangible proof that effort works, that you're not stuck, that you're capable of far more than you believed. Each hour becomes a receipt, not just of time spent, but of integrity kept. You said you'd show up. And you did. That alone builds self-trust, which is the foundation of every breakthrough. What surprises most people is how the effects leak into other areas of life. Discipline in one domain raises the standard everywhere else. You start eating better, thinking sharper, speaking clearer. Not because you're forcing it, but because the person you're becoming can no longer tolerate mediocrity in other areas. Compounding doesn't just improve what you do, it elevates who you are. And none of it happens through intensity. It happens through consistency. Yeah, it happens through consistency. Through the quiet repetition of small acts done with purpose. Through the hour you give when no one is watching, when results aren't obvious, when motivation fades. That is the hour that compounds. That is the hour that builds the future. The compound effect isn't exciting at first glance. In fact, it's almost boring. It asks you to do small things every day and promises nothing in return immediately. But this is where the real advantage lies. Because while most people are chasing intensity and breakthroughs, the ones who commit to consistent effort quietly begin to separate themselves. 1 hour of focused effort feels ordinary when you're in it. It doesn't look like much. It doesn't feel like progress. What matters is that it's happening, that something within you is being built. That hour, done with intention, becomes a brick. Not in a wall of busyness, but in a foundation of direction. It's invisible construction, but construction nonetheless. When repeated daily, these hours stack. And like all things that compound, the beginning is slow. Painfully slow. It might even feel like it's not working. But that's the trap most people fall into. They expect visible returns too early, so they quit before the real gains appear. But effort doesn't reward the impatient. It rewards the consistent. The curve of compounding is always deceptive. For days, weeks, even months, it may feel flat. You show up, do the work, and nothing moves. Then, suddenly, something clicks. You improve faster, ideas come easier. Discipline becomes less of a battle. You're not trying harder, you're simply becoming better. And that's the result of accumulated practice, not sudden talent. Over time, your 1 hour becomes more efficient. What once took 60 minutes now takes 30. But you still give the full hour, not because you have to, but because you want to. The time itself hasn't changed, but your capacity within that time has grown. That's the secret nobody tells you. The hour stays the same, but you don't. This kind of effort builds internal momentum. It trains your mind to expect forward movement. It teaches you to trust time, not just motivation. Each session reinforces your identity as someone who follows through. And that identity shift is what makes long-term change sustainable. You're not relying on energy anymore. You're relying on who you are becoming. Most people never experience this because they stop just short of the turn. They do the work for a few days, maybe a few weeks, and decide it's not working. But they're measuring in snapshots, not in sequences. Compound effect doesn't reward the immediate. And it rewards the unwavering. The people who choose to act without needing to feel progress every time. What makes this rule powerful is not how much effort it demands, but how small the daily ask is. Just 1 hour out of 24. But it's the repetition, the relentless, almost stubborn consistency that makes it transformative. Small inputs over time always create large outcomes when they're aligned with purpose and repeated without negotiation. Inspiration is unreliable. It comes in flashes, often at the wrong time, in the shower, while driving, just before sleep. It's emotional, unpredictable, and temporary. Yet so many people build their lives around it, waiting for the perfect moment, the right energy, or the surge of motivation before they act. But if you're serious about change, you can't afford to wait. You have to act even when the feeling isn't there. Ritual is what you do when inspiration is missing. It's the system that replaces mood. It's the decision to show up, not because you feel like it, but because you said you would. The beauty of ritual is that it doesn't care if you're tired, distracted, or uninspired. It only asks one thing: consistency. That's why it works. It's stable when you aren't. Inspiration is lightning. Ritual is the grid. If you wait for lightning, you might get lit up once in a while. But if you build the grid, you have power every day. The people who build lasting futures don't rely on sparks. They build circuits, dependable systems that keep them moving, even in the absence of excitement. There's nothing romantic about sitting down to work when you'd rather do anything else. There's nothing glamorous about repeating the same routine every day, but there's something deeply powerful about it. Ritual teaches your mind and body when it's time to focus. Over time, it reduces resistance. You don't debate whether you'll do the work. You just do it, because that's what the ritual demands. And here's the irony. Once you commit to ritual, inspiration actually shows up more often. Because you've created the space for it. You're not waiting for it. You're meeting it halfway. You're meeting it halfway. By showing up at the same time, in the same place, you train your mind to enter a state of readiness. It's not magic. It's conditioning. Most people treat discipline as a grind, something mechanical. But ritual, done right, isn't robotic. It can be sacred. It's the one part of your day where you're in full control. You set the rules. You define the tone. It can be a quiet hour with coffee and a notebook, a walk with a podcast, or focused deep work with no distractions. The content doesn't matter. The commitment does. The commitment does. Without ritual, you become a victim of your emotional weather. If you're stressed, you skip. If you're tired, you delay. If you're discouraged, you stop. But with ritual, you act anyway. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just steadily. That steadiness becomes a strength that others don't see, but you feel in everything you do. Over time, ritual becomes a kind of internal contract. It holds you accountable when motivation fades. It reminds you who you are when doubt creeps in. It gives structure to days that feel chaotic. And it gives you something more powerful than inspiration. It gives you proof that you're serious about building something that lasts. Most people think change has to be dramatic. They look for bold moves, big leaps, sweeping transformations. But that's not how real change usually works. Real change is subtle. It begins with a decision that seems small, so small it almost feels insignificant. But when repeated with intention, that small action shifts your trajectory. A plane veering just 1 degree off course won't look any different after 10 miles. But fly that way for a few thousand, and you'll land in a completely different place. That's how small daily actions work. They don't change everything overnight. They quietly bend your future in a new direction, and with time, that bend becomes undeniable. The danger is that small actions are easy to ignore. Skip one day and nothing breaks. Delay one task, and the world doesn't collapse. So we assume it doesn't matter. But it does. Because we're not just choosing an action in the moment, we're choosing a direction. And that direction compounds over time, whether we're aware of it or not. Every action you take reinforces a path. When you make one healthy choice, you increase the odds of making another. When you sit down for one focused hour, you make it easier to do it again tomorrow. You're not just building behavior, you're shaping momentum. And momentum, even when it starts slow, is one of the most powerful forces in any transformation. What makes this principle so freeing is that it removes the pressure to be extreme. You don't need to flip your life upside down. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to move, even slightly, in the direction of the future you want. The magnitude of your action matters far less than its alignment with your purpose. It's also what separates those who build lasting change from those who chase short-term motivation. Anyone can take a massive step once. It takes real clarity to take small steps consistently. But those are the people who end up furthest down the path. Not because they started with more, but because they stayed in motion, even when the change was invisible. Every time you choose a small, aligned action over convenience, you reinforce a new pattern. Every time you follow through on something that matters, even for just a few minutes, you strengthen a belief that you're someone who takes ownership of their path. That belief, over time, reshapes identity. And identity is what sustains growth when willpower runs dry. That's why small actions carry so much weight. Not because of what they achieve in the moment, but because of what they set in motion. They shift the angle of your life by degrees, and those degrees define where you end up. It doesn't look like a leap, but it becomes one. Not instantly, but inevitably, change is not just about what you do. It's about who you're becoming. Most people focus on the outcome, the goal, the result, the finish line. But what actually lasts is not the achievement. It's the shift in identity that happens through the process. The real reward of consistent action is not what you get. It's who you become by doing it. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you cast a vote for a different version of yourself. One that doesn't need motivation to act. One that follows through even when no one is watching. Over time, those votes add up. And at some point, without even realizing it, you stop trying to act like the person you want to become and start being them. This is why small, consistent habits matter so much. They don't just change your outcomes, they rewrite your self-perception. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. That shift might be invisible to others, but it changes everything in how you move through the world. The identity shift isn't loud. It doesn't happen with fanfare. It happens in the quiet moments when you choose to keep a promise to yourself. When you do the work, when it would be easier not to. When you pick your future over your feelings. These moments feel small, but they're foundational. Right here. They redefine what you believe about your capacity. When people struggle to stay consistent, it's usually because they're focused on the wrong layer. They're chasing outcomes without anchoring to identity. But behavior that doesn't match how you see yourself will always feel like a battle. When you begin to identify as someone who honors their word, who grows daily, who builds intentionally, the behavior begins to align naturally. This shift also protects you when things get hard. When you hit a plateau, when progress slows, when doubt creeps in, identity keeps you grounded. You don't quit because the habit isn't working fast enough. You keep going because this is who you are now. You're no longer performing discipline. You've internalized it. It's also what makes change permanent. Willpower fades, goals evolve, but identity is sticky. Once you believe a new truth about yourself, you begin to defend it. You reinforce it with your choices. And those choices keep compounding, deepening the foundation of who you are becoming, without needing constant effort to prove it anymore. This is why the 1-hour rule is about more than productivity. It's about alignment. Every time you show up for that hour, you reinforce a story. I am someone who invests in my future, who takes ownership, who does not wait for permission to grow. Most people don't lose time in chunks. They lose it in fragments. A few minutes scrolling here, a couple of videos there, endless tabs open with nothing being done. These habits don't look dangerous because they're common. But over time, they become the silent thief of progress. They take without asking and leave nothing behind. Sucking habits aren't always obvious. They often feel harmless, even relaxing. What they actually do is fragment your attention, erode your focus, and pull you further from anything that builds meaning. You don't feel it immediately. That's the trap. But by the end of the day, you're drained without having moved forward. Replacing those habits doesn't start with guilt. It starts with awareness. It means asking hard questions about how your time is spent and whether it's aligned with who you want to become. It's not about removing all rest or fun. It's about reclaiming time that's being wasted unintentionally out of boredom, avoidance, or habit. When you identify even one recurring distraction and replace it with 1 hour of deliberate action, the shift is massive. You're not just changing your schedule, you're changing your mindset. You're saying, this hour matters. And that small declaration, repeated daily, realigns your relationship with time itself. Purpose doesn't always mean passion or grand vision. Sometimes purpose looks like quiet commitment. Like choosing to read instead of scroll, to build instead of browse, to practice instead of procrastinate. Purpose shows up in the decision to trade fleeting dopamine for durable growth. And that trade, over time, changes everything. The difficult part is not removing the habit. It's facing what the habit was covering up. Most time-sucking behaviors serve a purpose. They numb discomfort, avoid effort, distract from fear. When you remove them, you're left with a gap. That gap is your opportunity. It's where clarity can emerge, if you're willing to sit with it and not fill it with more noise. Over time, replacing distraction with intention becomes less about discipline and more about alignment. You no longer need to resist bad habits. They just don't fit anymore. They don't belong in the life you're building. The hour you used to waste now becomes one of the most energizing parts of your day. Not because it's easy, but because it's aligned. The people who create meaningful change in their lives don't have more time. They have fewer leaks. They've taken back the hours that were slipping through the cracks and reassigned them to something that compounds. Not perfectly, not instantly, but deliberately. Legacy isn't created in a moment. It's not the product of a single achievement or a headline-worthy success. It's the slow accumulation of choices made when no one is watching. It's the result of what you repeatedly prioritize, what you're willing to invest in, and what you refuse to compromise. Especially when it would be easier to do so, most people imagine legacy as something tied to age, or something written after you're gone. Something written after you're gone. But legacy is being built right now, in real time. It's in how you show up today, in what you give your energy to, in the hours you either waste or use to build something that will outlast you. The 1-hour rule brings that truth into focus by turning legacy from an abstract concept into a daily practice. 1 hour may not feel like enough to matter, but over time, it becomes the difference between a life of reaction and a life of design. Legacy isn't built in large blocks. It's built in single hours, written pages, practice skills, honest conversations, decisions made with integrity. It's what you choose to move forward, even when progress is invisible. This is where most people get it wrong. They chase legacy in big gestures while neglecting the daily habits that define their character. But who you are becoming shows up most clearly in how you use your time when no one is measuring. Your legacy isn't just the work you leave behind. It's the standard you held yourself to while creating it. When you commit to 1 hour of focused, future-oriented effort, you create space for legacy to take form. Not through perfection, but through repetition. That hour becomes the proof of your intent, the daily brick laid in a structure that will eventually speak for you, long after the noise of the world has moved on. And legacy isn't just about achievement. It's about contribution, about creating something that makes others better, even in small ways. That kind of impact doesn't happen accidentally. It comes from daily choices that favor purpose over comfort, value over vanity, depth over distraction. It's easy to postpone legacy, to tell yourself you'll focus on it later, after the job, after the stress, after the perfect time arrives. But the truth is, legacy doesn't wait. It's being written every day, whether you're intentional about it or not. The question isn't whether you'll leave one. It's whether it will be chosen or defaulted 1 hour a day. May not seem like a legacy-building act, but over years, that hour defines your work, your mindset, your relationships, and your character. That hour, multiplied by consistency, becomes the story that people remember, not because you tried to impress them, but because you chose to build with quiet, deliberate effort.